Imagine getting a massive promotion right on the very last day of your 30-year career.
Oh, you pop the champagne.
Right. You pop the champagne, thinking you just secured a much higher payout for your retirement. But then you run the math under the government's brand new pension scheme.
And the reality sets in.
Exactly. You realize that promotion actually just costs you money. Today, we are running a strategic policy briefing on the Unified Pension Scheme, or the UPS, which is rolling out on April 1st, 2025.
And we are going to look at why quirks like that exist. Because,
Yep.
look, pensions are not just some sleepy human resources topic.
No, not at all. When you pull back the curtain on how a nation funds its retirees, you are looking at the ultimate high-stakes puzzle. We are talking about national fiscal policy, the retention of top-tier talent, and really the absolute limits of state capacity.
This shift from the current national pension system, the NPS, to this new UPS, it is going to fundamentally alter the machinery of the government. So our mission for this deep dive is to convert this massive policy update into a high-scoring analytical framework for you.
Right, because this won't just be a list of rules. This is a war room-style analysis of how a government actually balances employee security against, well, sustainable national finance.
Let's get straight into it. To understand the sheer scale of this shift, we really have to look at the structural problem the government is trying to solve here.
The background layer, right, like why create a third system in the first place?
Exactly. You cannot appreciate the UPS without understanding the ghosts of the systems that came before it. So, historically, India operated on the old pension scheme, the OPS.
Right, the one everyone keeps talking about going back to.
Yes. But under the OPS, employees contributed absolutely nothing from their paychecks toward their retirement. The government bore the entire fiscal weight, paying retirees out of current tax revenues.
So in economic terms, that created a massive unfunded liability.
A massive one. You essentially have a pay-as-you-go system where today's taxpayers are funding today's retirees, but with no dedicated investment pot generating returns.
I mean, it is essentially putting the state's retirement obligations on a credit card and expecting future generations to pay the bill.
Which is fundamentally unsustainable. I mean, some state governments were eventually spending upwards of 25% of their own tax revenues just servicing pensions.
Wow, a quarter of the budget. Right, which obviously led to the drastic pivot.
Yeah.
To stop the fiscal bleeding, the government introduced the National Pension System, the NPS.
Yes, the defined contribution model.
Right, where the employee paid 10% of their basic salary, the government chipped in 14%, and that money was just, invested in the market.
But imagine the psychological whiplash there.
Oh, absolutely. You go from a system where the government guarantees your final payout to the penny to a system where your retirement is tied to the whims of the stock market.
Exactly. If a global financial crisis hits the year you were supposed to retire,
Your entire financial security could just be wiped out.
and that anxiety is exactly what fractured the social contract between the state and its bureaucracy. The NPS fixed the fiscal drain for the government, but it transferred all the market risk onto the individual employee.
And when you are trying to execute massive, multi-decade national initiatives, you need a motivated, stable civil service.
You cannot have your administrative workforce constantly distracted by market volatility. So the UPS is the government's rationale to bridge this gap. It attempts to blend the defined benefits of the old system with the contributory funded mechanics of the new system.
It is an interesting hybrid. If the OPS was an all-inclusive fixed menu where the restaurant just, covered the tab, and the NPS was a potluck where you only get what the stock market manages to cook up.
Meaning if the market crashes, your retirement dinner is ruined.
Exactly. Then the UPS is more like a guaranteed buffet. The food is always there. You know exactly what you're going to get. But to keep the restaurant from going bankrupt, the government is footing a massive grocery bill behind the scenes.
That is a perfect analogy for your analytical framework.
Though I have to push back on one of the rules I am seeing in the policy text. An employee can actually choose to stay in the NPS if they want.
They can, yes.
Doesn't that just create a confusing dual system administration? And the text is very clear that they can only choose once. There is no trial period, no going back. Why lock them into such a rigid choice?
Well, the rigid one-time choice forces a calculated risk assessment by the employee, but it preserves administrative stability. From a governance perspective, you cannot have millions of employees jumping back and forth.
Right, like day trading their pension scheme.
Exactly. Between a market-linked scheme and a guaranteed benefit scheme based on monthly stock market fluctuations, That would create an accounting nightmare.
So by locking the decision in, the government walls off the administrative complexity?
Precisely. It maintains the investment flexibility for those who genuinely prefer the market growth potential of the MPS, while establishing a secure baseline for everyone else.
Okay, that makes sense. You force people to pick their lane, so let's actually look at the mechanics of this guaranteed lane. Listen, if you are building your memory anchors for an exam, this is the facts and data layer you need to lock down.
Yes, write these down. The headline feature is the 50% rule. The UPS guarantees an assured pension of 50% of the employee's average basic pay.
But here's the catch, and this goes back to that promotion scenario we started with. It is 50% of the average basic pay drawn over the last 12 months before retirement.
Which is a crucial distinction.
Right, because under the old pension scheme, the payout was based simply on your very last drawn salary plus dearness allowance. So why the 12-month average?
The 12-month average is a vital anti-gaming mechanism. Under the OPS, if an employee received a promotion or a significant pay bump in their final month of service, their entire multi-decade pension was permanently artificially inflated based on that single month's salary.
Wow, okay. So by smoothing the calculation over a 12-month average, the UPS prevents that sudden spike.
It protects a fiscal corpus. So yes, a last-minute promotion yields a slightly lower pension under the UPS than it would have under the OPS.
Interesting. But to even unlock that full 50%, there are strict timeframes, right?
Yes, you need a minimum of 25 years of qualifying service. If you serve less than 25 years, the payout scales down proportionately.
And there is a hard floor. You have to hit a minimum of 10 years of service to get anything at all.
Right. But if you do hit that 10-year mark, the UPS guarantees an assured minimum pension of 10,000 rupees per month.
10,000 rupees.
Yes, that floor is a crucial Social Security benchmark. For context, the minimum under the previous baseline was 9,000 rupees.
So it's a bump up.
A slight bump, calculated to cover basic sustenance and dignity for lower-tier employees who might not have accumulated high basic pay during their tenure.
And the policy also builds in a robust family net.
It does. Upon a retiree's death, their dependents receive an assured family pension equivalent to 60% of the pension last drawn by the retiree.
60%. Got it. This is about preventing sudden descents into poverty for surviving spouses. But obviously, 10,000 rupees today does not have the same purchasing power as 10,000 rupees a decade from now.
Inflation eats away at fixed incomes.
Right. So the policy states that inflation indexation, the dearness relief, is tied specifically to the All India Consumer Price Index for industrial workers.
Yes, the AICPI-IW.
Let's translate that jargon. Dearness relief is basically an allowance the government pays to offset inflation. But why tie it to the Industrial Workers Index specifically rather than just, a general national inflation metric?
Because general inflation metrics often include a broad basket of goods. They include luxury items, electronics, and services that might not reflect a retiree's actual cost of living.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
The Consumer Price Index for industrial workers heavily weights essential commodities, food, basic housing, and healthcare.
The exact areas where retirees spend the majority of their income.
Exactly. These are the most volatile parts of inflation. By tying the dearness relief to this specific index, the government ensures that the real value of the pension is protected against the rising prices of actual necessities.
Not just abstract economic shifts. I love that. Okay, I want to look at the superannuation payment next. The lump sum you get the day you actually retire.
This is a major shift from the old rules.
Right, because in the OPS, taking a lump sum meant dealing with a commutation of your pension. Commutation basically means you are trading away a chunk of your future monthly checks to get a big pile of cash up front today.
Under the old rules, you could commute up to 40% of your pension, but your monthly checks permanently shrank.
Which is brutal if you live a long time. How does the UPS handle that upfront cash?
The UPS fundamentally changes this mechanism by completely decoupling the lump sum from the monthly pension amount.
Wait, really? Decouple completely?
Completely. At retirement, alongside their standard gratuity, employees receive a lump sum payment calculated as 1/10 of their monthly emoluments.
Emoluments, meaning their pay plus dearness allowance.
Exactly. 1/10 of that, as of the retirement date, for every completed 6 months of service.
Okay, let me pause you there. The vital mechanism here is that taking this lump sum will not reduce the amount of the assured monthly pension.
There is zero commutation penalty. You get the upfront capital for immediate post-retirement needs, like paying off a mortgage or medical expenses, without sacrificing your long-term monthly security.
Okay, but if the payouts are guaranteed and the lump sum doesn't shrink the pension, the money has to come from somewhere. Let's move to the government response framework. We have to follow the fiscal finance math here.
Let's do the math.
Under the NPS, the employee paid 10% and the government paid 14%. Under the UPS, the employee still only pays 10%, but the government's contribution leaps to 18.5%.
It is a massive jump.
Why 18.5? Who came up with that number?
That leap from 14 to 18.5% is pure actuarial science. Because the UPS guarantees a 50% defined benefit, regardless of how the stock market performs, the pension fund requires a massive capital buffer to absorb market shocks.
So it's an insurance premium.
Exactly. The government's extra 4.5% contribution is the insurance premium it pays to guarantee the employee's returns. It ensures the corpus is large enough that the state doesn't have to suddenly dip into general tax revenues during a market downturn.
Which would just recreate the unfunded liability crisis of the OPS?
Precisely. It's a firewall.
But looking at the policy and governance framework, there is a glaring ambiguity when it comes to taxation.
Ah, the Income Tax Act issue.
Right. Under the Income Tax Act of 1961, central government employees get a 14% tax deduction for the government's contribution to the NPS. But the government has not yet clarified if that 18.5% contribution under the UPS will receive the same tax shielding.
And if that isn't clarified soon, employees are flying blind when making their one-time choice. The lack of clarity under the Income Tax Act creates immediate transition friction.
A policy is only as effective as its regulatory rollout.
Well said. But taking a step back into the significance analysis, we have to connect this 18.5% figure to the macroeconomic reality.
Interlinking engine, right, connecting governance to the economy.
Yes, this is not just an HR expenditure. It is a profound lever of state capacity. If a nation is pushing toward massive developmental goals initiatives like Viksit Bharat 2047, sweeping digital infrastructure projects, or complex defense modernizations, it requires a bureaucracy that is not distracted by personal financial survival.
By removing the psychological burden of market risk, the UPS theoretically ensures administrative focus.
Exactly. You are buying state capacity.
I see the logic for state capacity, but I have to bring up a massive equity pushback here. We talk constantly about inclusive economic growth. Yet this scheme, with its heavy 18.5% state subsidy, primarily benefits a microscopic fraction of the national workforce, the central government employees.
True.
The NPS was actually voluntary for workers in the unorganized sector. A gig worker or a farmer could use it. But the UPS has no provisions for the unorganized sector.
It does not.
Aren't we essentially using taxpayer money to build an elite, insulated tier of Social Security for government workers, while leaving the vast majority of the country's workforce entirely exposed to the very market risks the bureaucracy refused to accept?
This is the critical evaluation layer right here. This is the core tension in the political economy of the policy. You have identified the friction between protecting the apparatus of the state and managing the broader national welfare economy.
It feels very inequitable.
The state is ensuring its own ease of governance by securing its workforce. However, from a societal standpoint, it absolutely exacerbates the divide between the organized, formal state sector and the unorganized workforce.
The government is essentially saying that the stability of its executing arm is a prerequisite for national development.
Even if the immediate benefits of that stability are highly inequitable. Yes.
Which brings us to the realistic limitations and the challenges of actually pulling this off. We know what the UPS is designed to do, but where does this break down in practice?
The primary vulnerability is the potential return of unsustainable liabilities. Yes, it relies on employee contributions, which makes it infinitely more stable than the OPS. But combining defined benefits with a rising government contribution severely constrains spending on other essential services.
Right, because the pot of money is only so big.
Exactly. If global inflation spikes, the dearness relief tied to that consumer price index will force the government's financial burden exponentially higher. Every rupee mandated for pension obligations is a rupee that cannot be spent on capital expenditure, border infrastructure, or public health care.
And then you have the sheer logistical nightmare of the transition itself.
The transition friction.
Right. You are moving millions of people from a system where their money is currently sitting in market-linked stocks and bonds back into a centralized, defined benefit structure.
The institutional capacity required for that transition is staggering. Managing the massive existing NPS corpus without losing value during the migration requires robust technological and financial integration.
You cannot simply liquidate billions of dollars in market assets overnight without causing severe market
No,
distortions.
you definitely cannot.
Okay, let's unpack this into an actual framework you can use in a high-stakes exam or policy memo. We need the answer writing conversion. Grab your pens.
Let's do the 150-word structure first.
Okay, the short answer.
Intro. Define UPS as a hybrid model rolling out April 2025. Body needs 3 points. First, the fiscal sharing shift, 10% versus 18.5%. Second, the assured benefits, 50% pay, the 10,000 rupee minimum, and inflation indexation. Third, the lump sum without commutation penalty.
And the way ahead.
Conclude with the need for tax clarity under the Income Tax Act and careful NPS transition management.
Perfect. Now give us the 250-word structure, the essay format.
Context. Start with the shift from OPS unfunded liability to NPS market risk, leading to the UPS balance. Dimensions. Financial, administrative, and Social Security.
Make sure you hit the challenges too.
Absolutely. Challenges. The potential fiscal burden and the unorganized sector exclusion. Recommendations and conclusion. Emphasize balancing bureaucratic welfare with sustainable state expenditure.
And if you are listening, here are the exact key words you need to underline in that answer. You need to use the phrase unsustainable liabilities, mention commutation of pension, contrast defined benefits versus market-linked returns, and flag the inequitable benefits tension.
Using that specific administrative vocabulary is how you signal a deep structural understanding of the stakes involved.
Let's lock this in with the final revision capsule before we finish. Give us the rapid-fire breakdown of the absolute essential facts.
5 must-remember facts. First, 50% of average basic pay for 25 years of service. Second, minimum pension of 10,000 rupees. Third, family pension at 60%. Fourth, the government contribution jumps to 18.5%. And fifth, indexation is tied to the All India Consumer Price Index for industrial workers.
And what is the one probable exam question they should prepare for?
Critically analyze how the unified pension scheme attempts to reconcile the fiscal prudence of the NPS with the welfare security of the OPS.
Excellent. Here is your 30-second last-minute revision summary. The UPS replaces the NPS for central employees in 2025. It is a hybrid model offering a guaranteed 50% pension and a lump sum without reducing payouts. It is funded by a massive jump in government contributions to 18.5%. It solves employee anxiety but raises serious questions about long-term national budget constraints and workforce inequality.
It really is a profound renegotiation of the state's social contract with the people who operate it.
It absolutely is. But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to explore on your own. The policy explicitly states that state governments have the option to adopt the UPS for their own employees.
Which is a huge variable.
Exactly. State governments often have far tighter budgets and much heavier debt loads than the central government. If your state decides to adopt the UPS to keep its bureaucracy happy, what happens to local spending on public schools or road repairs or rural health care when that massive 18.5% pension bill comes due? Keep an eye on your state's budget next year. Because in economics, the math always has to balance somewhere.